Welcome to the webinar. My name is Martin O'Neill. I'm the head of marketing here at Rostify. We've got a great subject today. We're talking about gamification in the voluntary sector. It's going to be about a 30-minute session. We've got questions, we've got polls, we've got interactive elements of the presentation too. Thank you, Dalton, for letting me know that I was muted. I'll now be able to carry on the presentation. I will share the recording afterwards, including my mess up at the beginning and the deck as well. So there'll be a link to the deck in the email that follows up. Before I go into the first slide and we begin, I just want to thank you ever so much for spending this period of time with me. And I'm hoping that you get a lot out of it. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and interactions. And this will be I think of these as like a knowledge session. So there's very little of any kind of product demo or whatever will be shown. This is going into theory. It's probably the reason why I'm best placed to give this talk, really, because it is a marketing subject. Gamification has been in my area of work and my world, my ecosystem. Gamification has been taking over for a very long time. I would imagine if any of you glanced at your phone, you probably see half a dozen apps that you use quite regularly that all have an element of gamification in it. And over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be showing you why that's important to your volunteering program and the lessons that we can learn from the experts, the apps that do it really, really well and get us all hooked. So let's go straight into this. So the intro, first of all, so leveling up. The hard truth of the matter is that volunteers, they don't live in a vacuum. Whether they're registering for your program or they're going about their day-to-day lives, they're being bombarded with messages from these apps that I've just talked about. There are massive corporations that they interact with every single day, from Starbucks to Strava, that show them how far they're progressing, giving them visual cues and milestones. And not only that, not only an individual reward, but also making them feel part of a community. And that's the essence of what we're going to try and get out of today as well, is how can you combine the two things? How can you show the volunteer what they're personally doing while also helping them feel connected to the overall program? Because if I'm being honest, and I do spend a lot of time nosing around volunteer programs, landing pages and sign up processes, it can be a little bit like filling out a tax return. You're bombarded with these sort of Microsoft forms or these pop-up forms that you're forever going page after page entering these details, and it's no wonder the drop-off for a lot of these are pretty high. And I'm going to show you how these apps overcome that. I'm going to show you a few examples that you can put into your program, and you won't need any specific software. These are just lessons learned really from the way that you're delivering it and maybe the messaging that's around it. If you have any questions, there is going to be a section coming up towards the end to go through that and maybe share some stuff. But what I'm about to bring up now is the first of a few polls that we're going to be asking the audience. So let's start with poll number 1. So hopefully you can see this. So one of my favorite questions really that I ask on these webinars is, who is responsible for volunteering at your organization? This actually tells us an awful lot about how prioritized volunteering is, perhaps how interconnected it is with the other elements of the business. And it also shows us the value that you put on the individual volunteer themselves as well. Now, obviously, this is dependent on the size of the organization. There's going to be a few organizations that are on the call today that come from very large organizations that can afford to have dedicated volunteering teams. Or the other side of a large organization is the fundraising or donation side of the operation is so big that volunteering has been sucked into that too. That has its advantages because you can cross-pollinate a little bit there. You can discover who in your volunteering pool is a super volunteer. Perhaps they're even been badged with, these are the super volunteers. And that gives you an opportunity to perhaps introduce some fundraising opportunities or donations to those too. So let's have a little look at the results. I'm going to share these. So end and share results. Thank you very much for everybody that completed it. Most people did. We can see that the for the most part, hopefully you can see this on the screen as well as I'm doing this. If you can't, I'm just going to say it anyway. So dedicated volunteering team comes out as the number one option. There are a few that are in volunteering. Interestingly, none in HR and people and culture, which I always think is the second pick normally that I see with these webinars. So we've got a lot of people on the call that are working for a dedicated volunteering team. That excites me because that means the future of your program, the way that you're delivering the language around gamification and getting people engaged in your program probably sits in your hands, which is excellent. It means that you can create these experiences. So let's keep going. Let's go to the next slide on here. So are we talking about gamification because we're worried about the number of people that we've got volunteering? Probably not, to be honest, because recent studies have come out. In fact, only yesterday did Points of Light release their sort of major paper that they've produced. If you haven't had a look at this yet, by the way, Points of Light they're currently doing a conference at the time of this recording for this webinar. They're doing a conference in Washington, and they released this paper. And I found it really interesting because it shows that volunteering in North America and US specifically for this is booming. When our lives are getting more and more busy, when there's more and more distractions, it's still not it's not stopping people from supporting causes that they care about. The challenge will never be that there isn't enough people. The challenge will be, can you break through the noise? And can you maintain loyalty? So formal volunteering is up 5%. So let's learn a little bit then about, if it isn't necessarily about growing your volunteer base, which is always important to do, and there are many tactics you can deploy to grow the overall base that you've got, but just holding on and growing the community that you've got, getting people engaged and getting people to keep coming back is far more cost effective. There is a sort of term that's in retail really, which is that it's 5 times more expensive to find a new customer than it is to hold on to a new one. I guess anybody that works in the retail or restaurant industry knows this, that it only takes one bad experience for you to lose somebody completely, and finding new volunteers and maybe going through recruitment drives and advertising and referral programs. Those are expensive things. It's far cheaper to show people a good time and get them keep coming back for more. So that's what gamification is about. This what we're talking about today is about probably the most cost-effective way that you could grow your program and keep people coming back is just getting them more engaged in the program. The amount of time that you may spend going through applications and reviewing who comes into your volunteer base, only for them not to start the first shift because maybe the sign-up process is a little bit clunky. Maybe the communication about the roles themselves isn't clear enough, and you're losing people. Now that is not time well spent. But there is a way. There are ways, and people do a very good job of getting people engaged. I'm going to show you a couple of examples towards the end of this of case studies of organizations, volunteering organizations, who have effectively managed to gamify the process to keep people coming back for more. Let me show you a couple of examples right now of I'm going to show you a couple of examples coming up of some apps that do it really well before we jump into the voluntary program examples. I've got a question here that I forgot to ask at the start, so I'm going to add it in now, which is how many active volunteers do you currently have? Now, this can be a tricky number sometimes because some people actually aren't even aware of the number of volunteers that they've got, which is a bit of a red flag for me personally. I think you should always know. I know that most charities, particularly in North America, have to actually register how many that they've got, but sometimes it's quite tricky to get that number and be clear about it. This often decides not just the amount of resources that you get, but really the amount of time that you're going to have to invest in the program as well. Anybody that's answering these polls, and I can see the answers coming in, 500 up, 2,500. That's going to be an awful lot of time that's spent managing applications and getting people engaged in your program. So I'm going to start with all straight away. Everybody answered this, which is really, really good. So we're going to jump straight into the results on this. There's quite a few here. There's about a third that are under 100. So you've got a small base that you're looking to grow. 100 to 500, you're in that sort of sweet spot really, where you've got a good program that's going, and maybe you're just looking at ways of developing it a little bit further. I think everybody beyond that point, there is a real admin job that you've got in front of you. They've got a lot of time consuming aspects of onboarding, and automation is your friend at this point, but also engagement is your friend, and apathy towards the program, or perhaps dropping out of it, is really going to be the what's stealing a lot of your time. Thank you for answering that one. Let me just go straight over to where I thought I was going to land, which is the consumer app playbook. So what can we learn from the apps that are on your phone? What can we learn from the people that I believe do this best? Now, I've jotted down a few examples on here. You've got Duolingo, Strava, Starbucks, LinkedIn, and Headspace. And if you'll forgive me, I'm just going to pick each one of these and just tell you why I think that they are brilliant at getting people hooked in that experience. And really, it's a loop. That's what they develop really, really well. It's that feedback loop of joining their program in the first place. So do Duolingo put up maybe 6 or 7 pages of forms and screening and whatnot, all the way till you get to an opportunity to interact with their product? No, but they're offering a different thing. The barrier to entry for learning a new language is going to be a hell of a lot less than encouraging them to volunteer with your program. But the lessons that we can learn from them is that they remove the friction. You're straight into it as soon as you possibly can. And when you are doing it, they measure daily streaks. Now I'm going to show you the next slide afterwards. I'm going to do a little bit of a dive into Duolingo specifically and tell you and show you the kind of the psychology behind that. But in essence, it's loss aversion. I don't want to lose my streak. And your volunteers, they engage with this too, right? If you've got somebody that's really proud that they volunteer with you, the badge of honor of knowing that they've volunteered for you, perhaps it doesn't have to be daily. Dailies can be a bit extreme, but maybe there's a weekly award that you can put in, that you can automate, that you can feed into your process. And that will certainly encourage people to keep coming back time and time again. Strava is a very popular app when it comes to gamification. They are the legends of milestones. Milestones are really important, especially when you're looking at your volunteer base. Even before you've done any work on gamification, I imagine that at least half the people that are on this call have a volunteer base where they have very loyal volunteers that have been coming time and time again. Now, there's no harm. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, well, what if you started a volunteer gamification process, but you hadn't really been tracking hours? Like, where do I start with that? Because I don't want to put, say, Jane, who's been volunteering with us for many, many, many years, perhaps. Where do I start her hours served? I think there's never going to be a better time to start something like this than today. And Jane will understand why you're importing it in. Perhaps give them a good example of implementing this, but after the fact, is you give Jane a volunteer champion badge, maybe that individual, because tracking her hours may go back a very, very long time. She gets the badge of honor of the volunteer champion, and then everybody after that is counting hours, or we can count Jane's hours from that point onwards. So Strava do a really good job of that milestone. That one more run is the message. Starbucks. Starbucks are, they were one of the first to bring in gamification, particularly in the food and beverage retail space. Their app, when launched, which was feels like a very, very long time ago now, really was a gateway for a lot of people into gamification and getting that status badge of certain number of purchases. Or they did a really clever thing over when they released, say, the pumpkin spiced latte. Are you a habitual buyer of that every single year? And that's tracked within your app too. It's very smart. And perhaps, so I'm always trying to think of what was an example that would work for everybody that's on this call. Perhaps you do like a yearly event, and in that big event that you do, the one-off larger one, maybe that's the spiced latte of your volunteer program, that when people do that event, they are tagged with a status that says that they contribute towards the big event of the year. LinkedIn. So if that's behavior and that's what how people are interacting with you. If we look at actually going through the onboarding and application process. So do they even finish filling out your form? LinkedIn do a really good job of making sure that your profile is completed. Now, a smart way to introduce this into your volunteer program would be to make sure that perhaps their preferences, perhaps there's a badge or at least a tag that you can offer people that says they have filled out every element that you would like to see from them. And these are like the not must-haves, but the good to knows. So maybe it's do you have any licenses for anything in particular? A forklift truck license, or truck license, or drivers, even just a driver's license. Filling out these little extra bits where you don't necessarily want to put that up front nice and early, because it's just another form, another field to fill out. And we know that every time you add a field to a form, the chances of them dropping off are, it grows, it exponentially goes up every time you add something. So maybe you keep it light at the start to get what you need, but then add a little bit of gamification into filling out the profile with the added flavor around your volunteer, that you would like to know these extra things. What sort of types of shifts would they be interested in, and do they have anything that you could benefit from knowing, such as a driver's license or a forklift truck driver's license. And Headspace is an app that's on my phone. I really enjoy this one too, and this is really good for that. I put on here, like, look how far you've come. I think looking back at your volunteer profile, or at least giving your volunteers the opportunity to view back on all the events and everything that they've taken part on, is a really good kind of sit back and appreciate where you've come. And it gets you pumped to do more with that organization too. Now, without any of these, it's a very vanilla experience. You're breaking the sign up flow. You're kind of like, well, I don't really have time to fill the rest of this out, or you're not really pushing them to do that next step, fill out that next bit of their profile, and even get them hooked onto that next volunteer experience. I think when you can take a step back and look at the best, when the best do it, it's quite easy to see how that can fit into the volunteering space and how to get people excited about it. I don't want to worry anybody with the fact that some of this stuff feels like maybe have to be like a multi-million-pound corporation, a billion-pound corporation to feed this stuff in. You really don't. You don't even need much in the way of software, really. You just need to be able to track hours and tag people. And there's a multitude of systems that can do that. It's just about recognition. More than anything else, it's that knowing nod that I see you, I see what you're doing. You aren't just an email address in the database. You are Jane. You've been with us from the beginning. We know what your preferences are, and we're rewarding you with that recognition. So Duolingo, I really, really like what Duolingo do. And actually, there's 3 things on here that I think directly cross over into the volunteering space. So intrinsic rules, extrinsic rules need intrinsic backing. So really, gamification is keeping people coming back. Why I've put that on there is because people are really, really busy. So really, this has to fit into their lives. And if you're lucky enough to have a volunteer program where it's built into an app, for example, and they can view and see that fits into their daily life. They can be on the bus, they can be on the train, they could be on their lunch break, and they get that immediate feedback loop. They can see, I've done this, and if I do X, Y, and Z, I can get that reward, or I can be recognized for that. Don't be too rigid with your systems. So far too many of these programs penalize people for missing something. I think even Strava do that a bit, to be honest. If you don't keep your streak up and it drops off, it feels like a real punishment. And although it works for them, that's not the industry that we work in. Volunteering is about the heart. It's about giving. It's about offering your time. We shouldn't penalize too quickly. So try to resist the urge of getting that streak element, and perhaps lean a little bit more into acknowledgement of doing a certain number of events rather than that. It can work for some people, perhaps in the sporting sector or something like that. That might be okay, but for the sort of maybe cause and cure sector and even sort of food banks or something like that, don't be too harsh with your gamification, and value lazy engagement. So we know that volunteers will always try and find a way to find the easiest path to they may want to quickly complete everything as much as possible. I think giving them the opportunity to drop in and out of the program is something that is we're seeing a bit of friction from volunteer programs about offering this flexi volunteering or micro volunteering. Just going back to that points of light strategy document that was heavily featured, micro volunteering and a low commitment but dropping in and out but still feeling part of something is a major element of their strategy for their next 10-year strategy. Something I'm really big on too, particularly for like younger volunteers as well. Gen Z volunteers don't have an awful lot of time. They have even less patience, and you still need to be able to give them that feedback loop without making them feel like they need to be constantly week in, week out supporting your cause. Now, I want to show you a couple of badges, examples that I've seen that I think are really, really neat. They've got Habitat for Humanity do a really neat thing where they talk about if you do a certain number of volunteering experiences with a particular team, you get a team badge. I think that's really, really nice. The kind of scout in me wants to collect them all, or a bit of a Pokemon vibe there of making sure that I'm in every single team or I've got all of those completed. That's a really neat way of doing it. One of my favorite charities that I work with, Literacy Pirates. This is the charity that helps helps children read by adults joining them for reading sessions and helping them develop their literacy skills. They have a brilliant system set up for tracking hours and the amount of shifts that they've done. There's an example right there of a lady that's picked up a 100 shift badge, which is absolutely awesome. And just having that on their profile, I mean, you can see the smile. Hopefully you can see the smile on her face. That probably says 1,000 words. I'm going to have a little bit of fun now with something. So something I've often recognized is that if I go onto any of the websites of the people that have joined this call, and if I'm speaking directly to you and you feel guilty for this too, you're not alone, is you call volunteers just volunteers. Like if you want to volunteer, you're applying to volunteer, and doesn't matter what you're doing for the most part, you're listed as a volunteer. Now, a really neat way of boosting engagement is to actually put a bit of fun into the role, sort of naming the naming of the roles. Basically, it helps sort of gamify the process. It helps people feel like there's a bit of character behind it too. So what I'm going to do with everybody that's on the call, we're going to kind of do like if you've ever seen like a comedy improv thing where people shout out elements of a role or a story, that's what we're going to do with this. I'm hoping you're with me with this because I'm just going to do it anyway, to be honest, but I like the idea of these. So I'm going to ask everybody right now, you've got the little chat option that's on the right hand side. I'm going to ask for a sector. Now, when I say a sector, I could mean, I don't know, like I'm going to say the sports sector or golf, or maybe it's an animal sanctuary or something like that. So I'm asking for an animal. I'm asking for a sector from the audience, and frequency of the role and core responsibility. So if I can see somebody, brilliant. Thank you so much, Deborah. You come straight in with food banks. I'm going to pick the first one that's on there. So we've got food bank. So how frequent should we do the role for food bank? Stick with me, by the way, because you're going to see what the outcome of this is, and you're going to want to do this yourself. So what's the frequency of the volunteer? Monthly. And what's the core job role of that person as well? So we've got a food bank volunteer that is going to be coming back monthly, and what are the main tasks that they're going to be doing? I'm going to wait for a few other people to put some options in there. Stacking shelves, helping customers. Love that. So I'm going to take that. So what I'm doing on another screen, got a bit of a cheat code here. I've got Google AI Gemini opened, and I've asked it to come up with a give me a mission, give me a name for this particular role. And if I go onto my deck here, and this is something that you can do with all of your programs too. Now, hopefully you can see what it's done. So that took us absolutely no time whatsoever. And obviously, if you wanted to spend a bit more time on this and flesh out these roles with your team, all I asked from you was I needed to know where were they volunteering, how often were they doing it, and what are they doing every single day. And it came up with the nutrition architect. Now these might not be perfect, and I've seen some funny ones while I was testing this out, but this is a really good way of perhaps reframing what they're doing at the at your program. It's probably a good way of both feeding us some creative names to the roles that you've got and getting people interested to have a look more. So perhaps you've got like a portal that shows the roles that you've got by not just putting volunteer, but putting like nutritional architect. That gets, I would look at that. So I'd be interested. What does that actually mean? And then I've gone in and I've got the mission that's here, and everything sort of feels connected to a theme. And then if you've got a bit more time and you've got a bit more creativity, perhaps you can weave that into the badges that you do, and the milestones and the like, sort of graphical representation of that. So thank you for I don't know if you went with me with that. Deborah certainly did, but I love this sort of idea. I think it puts a bit of character to your program. Okay, I've gone backwards, so let's go forwards. So we got our last poll, which is this one here. So what is your biggest roadblock with volunteer retention at the moment? The options are people tend to be just one and done attitude with a lot of their volunteers. Keeping people active after 6 months, that's an interesting one. Encouraging people to step up and take leadership roles. I think what I mean by that as well is in some organizations, volunteer managers themselves are volunteers. And then communicating new opportunities. So is your challenge actually getting word out there that you've got these roles? Yeah, so we are still filling out a few of these. I am gonna give it a couple more votes because there is a theme developing here. Leave it just a second because it's on the perfect answer for me to talk about what's coming up, but I don't want to just presume that this is where we're going to go with it. And all it did was grow the one that I was going to talk about. So that is excellent. So I'm going to show you this. So we've got a couple of people choosing like one and done and encouraging people to take leadership roles. That's fine. But keeping people active after 6 months. So everything that we've just talked about there about recognition milestones, perhaps tagging people with the types of roles that they've got and maybe offering those roles in a way that's a little bit more engaging, that all helps you drive that engagement longer than maybe just the endorphin kick of signing up and maybe doing your few shifts. When the excitement of that starts to wane out a little bit and you need to keep them coming back for more and be feeling like they're part of this community, that's really where gamification can kick in. Ironman, can you see my screen? Is this still showing or is it on there? Give me just a second because I can see that I need to switch back to this screen. So Ironman is an organization that we work with. Dismiss. Is that okay? Hopefully you can all still see that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, it's just that I didn't close the poll. Sorry about that. Ironman is an organization that we work with, and they have a shop. Now that in their reward shop, basically every shift that you do builds up points. All of those points can be used to buy merch. People that do Ironman competitions and people that volunteer for Ironman competitions are obsessed with merch. So if you are lucky enough to have that element of what you do too, it's a really smart idea to follow their lead and encourage that. I'm going to show you another example of that as well coming up soon. The first thing that I showed you was the fact that it wasn't about that there isn't enough volunteers out there. It's really that you've got a leaky bucket. You've got people coming into your application flow and you're either losing them at the application process or you're losing them slightly further down the line when after the 6 months burnout's gone. So by applying badges, point systems and automating the re-engagement of your volunteers, you're going to give yourself a much better chance to get that volunteer tail lasting a hell of a lot longer. And we know that today's volunteer could be tomorrow's donor if you work in there in a sector where there's potential donors too. So the value isn't just I'm saving because I'm not having a recruit. It could be even it could even be more impactful than that this engaged volunteer that you're showing recognition to, that they feel valued, could also be a potential donor to your program too. And we work with I'm going to finish up here with just this one, but we work with a whole range of organizations that do this really, really well. They have the point systems, they automate as much as they can, because it is quite tricky to do this just on spreadsheets. It doesn't matter if you're using Rostify or any kind of volunteer management software platform. If you're able to track hours and recognize what people are doing and the events that they're doing, you have a great opportunity to reframe your language, tag people appropriately what they're interested in, and making them feel that they've got that connection loop and that they want to keep coming back for more. But if I could leave you one bit of advice, don't be harsh. If they don't continue the streak, or if they don't do every single event, don't make them feel like they're being punished for that. Reward every interaction that they have with them and recognize them longer term. And I'm going to finish there. So I just about managed to get that in half an hour. If it wasn't for my muted start, I probably would have done that. There is a question box that's in the top right-hand corner of what you're looking at the moment. If anybody's got any questions, or even if they just want to share something that they're doing at the moment for gamification, I'd be really keen to see that and try and answer your questions too. If that is all, I just want to share one last thing with you, which is we're working with the Bank of America and Chicago Marathon. They are the experts at corporate volunteering, so how to build corporate volunteering partners. There's their team is going to be joining us for a live webinar and a Q&A on the 15th of July at 2 p.m. You can either sign up for that directly through our website, or you can scan that QR code that you can see on the screen, and that will take you to the landing page to sign up for that one too. If you consider volunteering, corporate volunteering to be part of your program, I implore you to hear from the experts here. I've got a couple of questions that come in. So I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to thank people to continually asking questions. I will share the recording afterwards as well. So thank you very much. I'm going to jump over to the questions now. We've got Demetra Morgan. So is it possible to get this recording sent? Absolutely. I will send it to you. Demetra, normally it takes about 24 hours for the system to process it and for the email to go out. So keep a lookout for that, but I'll make sure that I'll be sending that out to you. Was that rewards page part of Rostify, or is that another platform? I did sneak in a Rostify screenshot. Yes, that's part of our platform. Plenty of volunteer management platforms do have a reward and recognition program. Depending on your aspiration and how much ambition you've got, they obviously vary in what they can offer. But most of it is built around tracking hours and tagging the individual. So they have a unique ID, and then you're recording the hours, and then you can attribute an automation. So if X person reaches X amount of hours, reward with this badge. That's how ours work. It's how a lot of them work too. I know some of this stuff can be a little bit daunting in setting up. It's actually easier than you'd think. Do we have any other questions on here? I'm seeing a lot of stuff from when I asked you to fill out that role before. I think that is all of them, but if there is anything that you would like to just ask us, just fire over either to martin.o'neill at rostify.com. You can send us a contact us request on our website. Thank you very much. I hope you really found the session helpful. We do actually have quite a lot of webinars on our website as well, of pre-recording of like on-demand webinars that you can catch up with. So if any of these topics are of interest to you, if this sort of content is interesting for you, they're short, snappy, and hopefully you take away a few things that you can put into your program. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you on the next one.